Hello, I'm Amy Kelly. We're inside today because I am giving you a beginner's lesson in winter houseplant care. And this is really important because the way that you look after these plants in the winter is different from how you look after them in the growing season through those warmer months. So especially if you've got plants like lovely flowering orchids that you want to flower again, there are some key things you need to be doing at this time of year in the winter. So if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe because I've got loads more brilliant videos coming up for you. Right now, I'm going to walk you through the 3 rules of winter house plant care that apply to pretty much all of your plants. And then I'm going to go through some specifics like how to get your gorgeous orchids flowering again. So let's get stuck right in. Winter house plant care rule number 1. Location. Do not have your houseplant right at the fireplace or right at the radiator, and at the same time don't put it beside the front door or the back door where it's going to get an icy blast every time the door is open. There is no plant that likes to sit on top of the radiator or on top of the fireplace, and I'm including cacti in that. The conditions that you have in your home with that artificial heating is nothing like what they get even out in the middle of the desert. There's no comparison. So don't think, oh, I've got a warm weather plant, I'll stick it by the radiator and it'll be happy there. It doesn't work that way. The temperature fluctuation is too great. You will just cook your plant. It will dehydrate really quickly and it will die for you. Now, in terms of the cold weather, if you've got your plant sitting by a door or a window that's going to be opened regularly, it's going to get a really cold, icy blast. It's going to be a shock for the plant compared to what it's used to in the house. And that's something important to think about when you're watering the plants as well. If you are using tap water that's coming out of the tap really freezing cold, or if you're using rainwater from a butt that's maybe frozen over with the winter frosts, that really super cold water is going to be a real shock to the plant. So you're much better to use room temperature water. This is really easy. All you need to do is get a little glass or a jug or a watering can, fill it up with water and just keep it near your plants so that whenever it's time to water them, you've got perfect room temperature water all ready to go. So once you have considered temperature, the other really important thing is light. All of your houseplants want bright, indirect light. So as much sunlight as you can give them, but not sitting in a baking south-facing window where they're just going to get scorched with lots of sunshine. So the winter means shorter days, so there are actually less hours of sunshine anyway. And if you live somewhere like Ireland, like I do, the quality of that light is much less bright. So that part of the house that was perfect for those houseplants in the summer, where they got that nice little bit of indirect light bounced off at them, all of a sudden it's like a black hole and they're not getting any sunshine anymore. So it's really important to move any plants that are somewhere too dark to a lighter place, to their little winter residence, so they can continue to grow and look beautiful for you. Winter houseplant rule number 2. Do not repot any of your houseplants in the winter unless it is an absolute emergency. During the winter, plants go dormant. So winter is not the time to be messing your houseplants about. So don't repot them. Don't try and take loads of cuttings from them at this time of year. It's not a natural growing time for your houseplants. So if you do a lot of damage to the roots when you're repotting it, the plant isn't going to have the energy to make itself grow loads at this time of year. So if you need to repot your plant, you're much better to wait until spring at the start of that growing season. Because your houseplants are not actively growing over the winter, you don't need to fertilize them. So whether you're using a slow release fertilizer or a liquid fertilizer, do that all through the summer, all through the growing season. Absolutely, once a week, once a month, whatever your routine is, go for it. But there is no point giving your plants fertilizer in the winter. Winter houseplant rule number 3, humidity. Now, the vast majority of your houseplants like humidity. Most of these have come from jungle sort of environments or forest environments where they're used to those lower light levels, which is part of what makes them perfect for growing in our homes, which don't have as much sunlight because they've got roofs on them. No brainer there. There are a few exceptions. So things like cacti and some of the succulents, yes, those maybe don't need as much humidity, but most of your indoor house plants, all of those lovely green leafy things, in general, they have come from forest or jungle environments. And so they need those higher levels of humidity, especially those epiphytic plants, things like your orchids. They really respond well to higher levels of humidity. And in the winter, when we all turn on our radiators or light the fire or switch on the central heating, that can actually dry out the air inside of our homes. So sometimes in winter, even though it's freezing cold and raining outside, the humidity inside your house can actually be lower than it would be at other times of year when you've got the windows open all the time. So obviously this is going to vary house by house, but it is something important to think about for your houseplants. So there's a couple of things that you can do here to help keep your houseplants really happy. Either mist your houseplants with a simple sprayer or mister, or you can keep them on a tray of gravel. So you just get a tray, fill it up with gravel or small decorative stones, sit your pots on top of the stones, and then put water in that gravel tray. So the pots are not actually sitting in the water. They're held up out of the water by that gravel or those decorative stones, but the water underneath them is going to evaporate and filter up lovely humid air to your happy houseplants. So those are your 3 winter houseplant rules. Location, don't do anything to the houseplants unless you absolutely have to, and think about humidity, and that will be happy houseplants for you all through the winter. Let's talk about orchids, because let's face it, the reason we all grow them is those gorgeous exotic flowers. So when you're growing orchids, you want to get them to flower as often for you as you possibly can so you get the benefit. First of all, there's lots of different types of orchids. This is just intended to be a guide for what to do for some of the most common varieties. I'm going to cover your Phalaenopsis or your moth orchids, your Dendrobium nobile, your Cambria orchids, which are hybrid, and your Cymbidium orchids. And hopefully that will cover most of the orchids that you're going to be able to get your hands on easily at a garden centre or a plant nursery, or even a supermarket or a florist. So first of all, the most popular is the Phalaenopsis or the moth orchids. Now, these are different from all of the other orchids that we're going to talk about. These orchids have evolved in full-on tropical jungle, like rainforest type jungle. So these are used to really constant temperatures. These are plants that really don't have a difference in their natural environment between the temperature during the day and the temperature at night. So if you want these plants to be really happy, that is what you are aiming to mimic. And if you look after them, you can get these to flower as much as 3 times a year. So it is worth putting the effort in. So that means giving these a temperature during the day and at night of between 21 and 24 degrees Celsius, which is 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So once you've got the temperature sorted, you just need to put them somewhere with bright, indirect sunshine. Put them in an orchid or a bark type potting mix, not actual compost or soil. They won't like that. And mist them or give them that little gravel tray to keep the humidity up for them. After the flower spikes have finished flowering, you can either cut down to a little node on the stem and it may reflower from that, or if you want to make life easy, you can just cut the flowering stem off completely and the plant will produce new flower spikes for you. You can use an orchid fertilizer on moth orchids all year round because they don't go into dormancy. And the last really important tip about your Phalaenopsis or moth orchids is that the roots of these plants need light, not just the leaves. So if you've purchased it in a beautiful little ornamental pot, inside of that there'll usually be a little clear plastic one. And so as soon as you can, you want to take it out of that decorative pot and either put it in a glass or a plastic pot so that that sunshine, that light can get to those roots, and that will help to stimulate the flowering as well. But moth orchids are not the only type of orchids you might come across. This is a Dendrobium nobile. It's sometimes called the bamboo orchid, and with that lovely bamboo-like stem, you can certainly see why. Now, this gets flowers all the way along that stem. This one's actually just recently finished flowering, but these are majestic when they're in bloom. They're becoming more readily available and increasingly popular because even when they're not flowering, they still look absolutely gorgeous. Now, these actually require the same winter care as some of your other types of orchids. So I'm going to introduce you to a few different varieties and then tell you how to look after all three of them. This beautiful creature is a Cambria orchid. So this is actually a hybrid that has been bred by orchid breeders. You will never find a Cambria orchid in the wild. These have been crossbred between loads of other different orchids. The defining features of these are these incredible little flowers. And these come in a wide range of colors and patterns, but with that really distinctive, almost spidery shape. And these little swollen bases to the leaves. So if you've got a plant, an orchid plant with a very ambiguous tag on it that just says orchid or something like that, and it's got those little swollen bases to the leaves, and it's got those really tropical spidery looking flowers in pretty much any color in the rainbow, you've got a Cambria orchid. And the last type of orchids are Cymbidium, also called boat orchids, which have these very large, beautiful waxy flowers and those gorgeous big long strappy leaves. So all of these orchids, your Dendrobium nobile, your Cambria and your Cymbidium orchids, all like the same care over the winter and really all year round. First of all, their roots do not need light, so you can put them in whatever decorative container you like and keep them in it. They're not the same as those Phalaenopsis ones. Phalaenopsis, roots need light. All your other orchids, the roots don't. They do, however, still need the orchid type potting mix, which will usually just be bark mixed with a few other things. So you can use just pure bark for these. They are all epiphytes, which means that they don't grow in the soil. They actually grow in little nooks and crannies on trees in the bark. So these, do not put them into normal potting compost. Use the proper orchid compost. And what makes these really different from those Phalaenopsis orchids is that these need cooler temperatures. So these have evolved in different parts of the world where there's more of a temperature variation between the day and the night temperatures. So to get these to flower again, these do need a winter dormancy period. So moth orchids, no winter dormancy. All your other orchids, winter dormancy. So how do you do that? You put these somewhere a little bit cooler and stop watering them. Now, if they start to look unhappy, by all means, give them a tiny drink, but you want to cut that watering right back and give them a couple of months of cooler temperatures that will put the plant into dormancy. So then when it starts to get warmth and starts to get water again, it'll go, oh, right, it's time to flower now. Let's get this show on the road. But you have to give them that dormancy period. So the temperature that you're looking for all of these orchids during the day is 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 to 24 degrees Celsius. And at night, they're looking for a temperature of 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. So that's a full 10 degrees Celsius difference between the day and nighttime temperatures. And that is going to trigger these to go into that dormancy, to store up all of their energy to start that cycle to produce gorgeous flowers for you in the spring. So there you have it. That is your beginner's guide to basic winter houseplant care. I really hope that is going to help you and your houseplants stay much happier this winter. In the meantime, whether you are inside or out, happy gardening.